Well, hello again, friends and fans. Raptor here. Welcome back to Deck Spec as we continue on with tanks. So basically, this whole tutorial, as you probably know by now, is all about showing you how to pick your basic units, and of course we're using America to do so, just to keep it very basic. And speaking of basic, I've just chosen again to remind you a NATO deck with no specifications. All nations are unlocked, so if you do a mixed deck for all of NATO, this is what you'll have. But again, we're not really reviewing what units to bring to battle. We're just reviewing exactly what types of tanks there are and what tanks are armed with and what exactly they can do on the battlefield. So we're looking at the M48A5 USMC tank here, and as you can see, well, it's pretty much, it doesn't get any cheaper than this. This is basically a Korea/World War II, even Vietnam era weapon. As you can see there in the lower right corner, it came out in 1975. So it's been updated from some previous tanks, of course, and it's got a nice light on it, which really doesn't mean anything. But you can see it's armed with a 105 millimeter main tank gun, and also has an M2 Browning machine gun. It's not very fast. This is probably the lightest of the light tanks for America. In fact, it probably is the lightest tank they have. Low armor, it's big, it's slow, it's clumsy. It's basically meant for really defense or cutting up infantry or taking out transports that are lightly armed. And of course, if you're the Marines, then this is going to be one of the tanks that you may want to bring into battle. 54 rounds, 500, all that. A step up from that is the M60A1 USMC, which is basically an M60 that's kind of been stripped of most of its parts and doesn't do as well. Actually, it has a few more points than the M60A1 patent, but still is not as good as really any of the other tanks. Keep in mind, for tanks, there are two things to keep in mind. Number one, main gun, which is its range to ground targets. For instance, there are three tiers for that. You have 1925, which is the minimum. Then in between there you have 2100, like the M60A3 Patton, and then you have the maximum range, like the M1A1 Abrams, that has 2275. Another thing you want to keep in mind is caliber. 105mm smoothbore kinetic area of effect rounds are not really going to do too much against a T80U, unlike the 120mm, which could do more, but are still going to take a few even direct hits to the side of a T80U. Would take some time to take it down if you had, for instance, the M1A1. So when we're looking at tanks here, keep an eye on the caliber and ammunition size of the main gun, and then also the secondary weapons. Most Americans tanks have secondary weapons that are pretty much the M2 Browning, or in the case of the Abrams, the M240. There's only one American tank that has a autocannon, and that is down here, the Starship, at least in this specific deck setup. Of course, there are other autocannons available to the Americans, but only the Starship in the tanks is mounted with one. So what we're looking at then is we're looking at basic light tanks here. And now we're going to step it up to cavalry tanks. The M551A1 Sheridan is what's considered to be it's a cavalry tank. It moves up with the airborne troops, can be dropped out of aircraft. So it's mean. It's got an ATGM, and that you can see is 2625, which is great for engaging. This is an ambush tank. This is primarily an ambush tank. In fact, there's even a recon tank that is similar to this that is pretty much the Sheridan with a couple of added optical sights on it, or sensors. So you can see here that it has 152mm heat round. Wow, that's actually really good. 152mm on it. In fact, that's the biggest cannon in the game, but that 152 one of the biggest tank rounds in the game, but that really is only 4. As you can see, the AP power is only 11. HE power is 4 though, so that's going to be very good for shredding up light units, not to mention the M2 Browning. So it's a very good ambush tank, and it's speedy as well. So there's basically your cavalry tank. There's also some specialized tanks that could also be considered cavalry tanks as well, but we'll get into those at another time. Moving on to medium tanks, we have the M60A1, which I previously said was probably less as effective as the Marine Corps tank. The Marine Corps tank does have more fuel, but does go slower. But the M60A1 is considered a medium tank here. 105, I mean, there's some basic stuff here. Optics poor, size big. These are basically defensive tanks, as were the Rise Patent and the M60A3 could also be considered as actually offensive tanks because they can do 60 kilometers an hour. Again, the Americans also get the super patent, but no need to go over that just yet. Again, we're just kind of going over the basics of medium tanks and what they get and their speeds. And rate of fire is also important too. As you see, the M60A3 can do 10 rounds, where the other two can only do 7. The Marine tanks can only do 7, and the even the Sheridan can only do 7. So M60 can fire a little faster. Not as I think actually that may be as fast as the T64, but T64A. But again, I don't know everything about the game. Going down here, you have some more kind of special. These are space tanks, really. These tanks here are a continuation of that cavalry tank line, except these kind of are a mix between cavalry and medium armor. So these two, the starships, are the Sheridan. These are basically very similar to the Sheridan, except they're larger, as you can see. So it's basically the Sheridan's top main gun portion mounted on top of the patent chassis. I'm sure it's not the exact same thing. Actually, it is, if you look very closely. So these are kind of medium tanks, kind of cavalry tanks. They're a crossover. But they're still cheap, 35 and 45. As you can see, though, this starship has an autocannon mounted right at top, and so that's great for taking down choppers and can chew up transports and infantry like crazy. Only one accuracy on it and 45 points. Again, these are really great for cutting up enemy transports and getting behind enemy lines. Really, taking out anything that doesn't have armor is the starship and the Sheridan's job. Okay, so keep in mind, this tank here is armed with ATGMs, a main cannon, and autocannon. When you get into some classes, like for instance the French, they're going to have a lot more autocannons and they're going to have a lot more accuracy on their guns, but they're going to be lighter in armor. So when making a large-scale NATO deck, you'll want one that's speedy and accurate. You'll want one that's heavy and slow. You'll want one that's a good mix between, and you'll want some cheap ones as well. I would not recommend the American M40 whatevers for any of this, even the U.S. Marine Corps tanks. If you have a mixed deck, go for what the Germans have. Their Leopards are very good for that, but we'll talk about that another time. Now it's time to get on to the big boys. There's 3 big boys for the Americans to choose from, and I'll tell you which one I give a tip of the cap to for both speed and accuracy, a well balance all around. So the M1 Abrams has 105 millimeter, and it can fire 2100. Not even the other tanks. No other tanks can fire that far except for the M60A3. So for 60 points for this medium tank here, you can have everything shown there, batteries not included, or you could step it up to the M1 Abrams, which has a little bit more of everything, including range in not range in the main cannon, but has more weapons and actually can travel a little bit further. As we step up to the M11P, if you kind of watch those icons there, not much is gained except for 2 more AP power at this current moment, that is. This could change at any time due to a DLC, and also better frontal armor. So for 10 more points, survivability and a little bit more damage to the enemy is pretty good. So not too bad there. Now, the M1A1 is the cream of the crop when it comes to American armor. And this is a real beast. It can fire 2275, which is the only tank able to do that. So it actually has over 100 meters on that M60 down there. So this is, again, a very good. The M11P you'll probably want to attack with, but the M1 Abrams can do both. Well, really, any of these heavy tanks can do both. But if you're going to attack, I'd say bring the M11P in greater numbers. But for the Abrams, use it as a specialty strike. You see an open, you see like a couple T-55s guarding a ton of artillery. Get in there with one of these boys, take out everything, and you got it good. 10 strength on these. You can see all the road speeds and fuel economy and everything. And that's pretty much all you'll need to know for tanks. Again, you'll have to keep in mind the hardened veterans are very important when it comes to making armored decks, and there's tons more to cover when it comes to the Brits, the French, the Germans, Canadians, Danish, Swedes, and Norwegians, and a lot of them actually get the Leos as well. So the Leo is a great class. In fact, the M1 Abrams is pretty similar to what the Leo kind of is. It's similar, but not exact. So anyway, keep in mind, you must definitely look at those range grounds and keep a look out for the caliber. In fact, the M1 Abrams actually has a higher caliber, so this is really what you're going to need to destroy the heaviest of enemy armor, and it's going to really eliminate threats, and can also be threatened itself, especially if the enemy gets behind you. But with the capability to do 60 kilometers per hour, the others actually can go faster. That's why I kind of recommended them for more of attacking tanks. But with the added armor and the slightly reduced speed, that is the cream of the crop. So anyway, leave your questions, comments, concerns, and everything else down below. Tell a friend, and don't forget to tell other people about this great video and Wargame Red Dragon coming soon. Again, this was a little short just due to the Americans' kind of specialty in armor. They have a couple of really good all-around tanks, and really that's kind of the Americans' thing, is to have a little bit of everything and bring it to the field for a pretty good price. We'll go over the other nations in the future when we make decks, and I would highly recommend the Germans and the Canadian, the Germans, the French, and the British for some of the best tanks, and the Canadians and all of Scandinavia pretty much share the Leos as well, which are a great tank line, especially that Leopard 2. So again, leave everything down below. Give your tips to other players down there. Talk about autocannons. Talk about ATGMs. Where the hell did the ATGMs on this thing come out? Right there, huh? I bet they do. Yeah, pretty cool. It's actually got a giant TV here. It's going to distract the Soviets with MTV, and then it's going to open fire on them. So, all right. Anyway, until next time, friends and fans, this is Raptor for the rest of Rat Pack, reminding you to keep the password and pin pan strong. Thanks for joining me for Deck Spec Tanks, and we'll see you next time. Bye.